Hello, you guys. Welcome back to Lifestyle Leaps. I'm Diem,
And I'm Hannah.
and today we're talking about our personal home buying experience. So, what led us to buy our first home, how we found our lender and agent, if we had some buyer's remorse or not, who knows? You'll find out.
We'll see.
And what will we do differently? So,
Yeah.
Hannah, why don't you start us off?
Okay. Well, oh my goodness. Well, what made me want to buy my first home? I think this is such a good question to start off with because I feel like it's different for a lot of people. And for me, I was really getting into personal finance at the time. And I had, really I dove into Dave Ramsey's stuff like a while before this. And I do remember part of his program is, well, what do you do if you want to buy a house, and saving the 20%, which you do not need, which you'll find out in a moment. So that was always in the back of my mind, but I came from a family that really didn't talk about this a lot. We didn't own, I say we, but my parents didn't own their first home for a while into our lives. So it wasn't something like some people do, where it's like you get married and you buy your first house and then you have your kids. So that wasn't my experience. So coming to that point of buying that first home really was through a lot of self-education financially, and really understanding that this is an investment tool and a retirement tool. And that's the thing that really got me going, was that this is going to be important for later in our lives in retirement. And during this time, I think I was already I was already almost 31 when we bought our first house. So yeah, so for me, I was thinking my parents at this time, they're already at retirement age. They don't have retirement. And so leading up to this, my husband was in the same place thinking about, okay, what are we going to do for retirement? Our parents don't have retirement, right? His parents didn't either, which also led him to that informed his decision with the type of job he wanted to get was, well, what do I want my future to look like? So for us, we were looking at, well, this is going to be important for our retirement, and it's going to be an important investment vehicle. And that's what really made me want to figure out how we could do this. And both my husband and I came from money mindsets that made things like this seem like they were impossible or very, very far off. And I really was starting to get interested in this about 5 years before I ended up buying my first house. But that was the biggest thing. It was like, how do we make this happen so that we can try to set ourselves up as soon as possible for the rest of our lives? So that's what it looked like for me, as far as that piquing my interest, really being like, this is something we need to figure out how to do. What did that look like for you, Diem?
I think, when I think about it, I was more about like designing a lifestyle. And I thought about, well, first of all, a lot of you guys know I was born in Vietnam and I lived in a hut. And then growing up, I lived in Section 8 housing. And I'm sure that I thought about eventually owning a home someday. But the dream wasn't necessarily to be a homeowner. The dream was, and always was, even when I started my cleaning business, how do I design a life where I have money coming in, but I was also able to live my life for today? And I saw real estate as a way to have passive income from rentals in the house hacking units within my home, or having a roommate at the beginning. And over time, building that portfolio to owning at least a few different properties, where when those properties are paid off in 30 years, I will have rental income indefinitely, but also earn cash flow for today so that I can live in it. But I wasn't able to accomplish that until I bought my first home.
Right.
And so the journey was reading, first wanting to get out of debt, wanting my business to grow and provide some income and stability, and then reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and having the vision come to me about how this lifestyle could come to fruition through real estate. And then it was about researching how to eliminate the debt, save the down payment, get the credit profile in order to make that first step.
Okay, so more lifestyle focus, which I love. I feel like I can draw that from Diem a little bit, be inspired by that, not be always as goal oriented, but remember the present. And Diem's very good at that. And would you say that in your journey so far, you've been able to see that come to fruition?
Yeah, it's true. Like the lifestyle that we live now is not super lavish, but we get to travel a lot, my husband and I. Last year we went to 21 countries or something like that.
Amazing.
And
So cool.
it was really cool. And a lot of that was able to happen because of real estate. Like we bought and sold one house that had, I think we pulled out like $77,000 to pay for our wedding and then to travel so we can do that debt free. And in the meantime, while we weren't working, we still had rental income to pay for our mortgages across the properties. So it wasn't really ever my inspiration or aspiration, I should say, to make as much money as possible. It was more so, how do I create a lifestyle that I can also save for retirement, but still enjoy my life in my youth?
I love that. And I feel like it's such a good thing to remember as we're talking about real estate as investments, and that's very money focused, but also remembering that this is where you live potentially, and how can you make that really improve your lifestyle and the moments that are in the present.
Yeah,
so,
and that speaks to people who are only interested in owning one home too,
yes,
you know, but imagine in 30 years if you were getting a standard term of on your loan, that if you had a house that was paid off, what would that feel like in retirement to not have a mortgage to pay for?
Amazing.
So
amazing.
Let's talk about what are the challenges that we faced. Do you recall some challenges when you were buying the first property?
Yeah, so I think something that is a challenge across the board when you're purchasing any home is trying to find the right home in the right budget. And so that is going to be a process in itself, and it's a personal process, right? It's going to look different for different people. But I think in that process is also the reminder that most of the time when you're buying your first home, it's not your forever home. And for us, as we got farther and farther in this wanting to buy a home, we also decided that this first purchase we really were hoping would be able to be a rental property eventually. And so for us in that, home search, we were even being more specific around what this first property had to look like, what the mortgage payment even had to be for the area that it was in. And at that time, we were even considering if we wanted to do house hacking, would we be able to partition off the home in a way that would make sense for us and the privacy needs that we felt like we needed. And so that was also part of that search when we started looking for a home was, okay, what does this house have to look like in order to fit our needs now? But then hopefully also be able to benefit from that in the future. So that was, a challenge, just first coming to that agreement. And when you're, in this process with another person, you're both going to have your own ideas. You're both going to have your own opinions, and that can be challenging. Ultimately, I think it brings you closer together most of the time if you come to those agreements, because it just means you have to communicate more. But that definitely was a challenge, making sure we were looking at the homes that could fit all of those needs, and not just be something that we wanted to live in right now, but something that also had potential for us to turn into a rental property in the near future. Not even, 10 years down the road. We really wanted to do that soon after that purchase. So that was definitely challenging, but thankfully we were able to find a home that fit the bill, but we had to get one that was a fixer-upper. So just being flexible, if I was, going to relive that experience, I think just reminding myself, be flexible with what this looks like and keep those long-term goals in mind. And I do think that's really important.
Yeah. My challenges were more on the financial part because I had just started to earn enough income through my business to purchase a home. But my last 2 years of tax returns income did not average to be enough. So, how do I bridge that gap?
Yeah.
It was to get a cosigner. That's not possible for everybody out there. I was fortunate enough to have a sister and brother-in-law who was willing to co-sign for me. And they know me to be a person of my word, to be very responsible, and if I'm in a dire situation, to come out with a plan. So, in talking with them about the possibility of co-signing, they already knew the type of person that I was. And then once I presented kind of the exit strategy of I will either refinance the house and take you off the loan, or I will sell the house within the next few years to figure that out before it's time for you to need your own credit profile to buy your own home. And so they agreed to that, but that wasn't the only hurdle I had. So it was the down payment, coming up with enough money for a down payment. So I had saved up kind of just enough money for a down payment actually, but not enough for closing costs. And you can kind of separate them into two buckets, but really it's one bucket. And so, plus what would it take to move in or furnish the place, right? And so I looked at all of my different options. I didn't have the possibility of a relative offering a gift. We were still living in, my dad lives in low income housing. So the resources weren't there for that, but I researched about the possibility of pulling out money from my Roth IRA account from when I was employed by another company. I had put some money away. And so I was able to take out $10,000 to put towards my first home tax-free. There are some guideline requirements that I researched and complied with. And so that was another hurdle. And then my third hurdle was affordability. So I lived in Santa Rosa, but I couldn't buy anything in Santa Rosa because anything that I could, that was just a standard single family home, was just so run down that I couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Or it didn't give me the ability to house hack reasonably.
Yeah.
And so I looked a little further away and I found a house in Ukiah that was an hour north and chose the lifestyle of commuting for a period of time until I could afford something that was closer to where I wanted to be. But in the end, the hurdles that we both faced are just things that help us learn and grow more.
Absolutely.
And it's not, even with 3 major hurdles, it's not a reason to say no if you find that home ownership is really for you.
Absolutely. And in this area, I just want to touch on affordability a little bit because that's a big thing in this market right now.
Yeah.
Is affordability nationwide.
Right.
It's not just we live in a very expensive area, but that affordability is hard everywhere, no matter where you are in the United States right now. And I think something that you just touched on where, there's going to be challenges, right? There's always going to be a reason to say no. And just making sure you have that goal in your mind of what that home ownership possibility means to you. And, as you've heard, it meant different things for us when we started, but keeping that goal in mind, I think, is really helpful in a time like this where, it isn't as affordable or it doesn't seem as affordable, and you might feel like you're taking a bigger risk, right, to get into that house. And I know in our first house, it felt like it was a huge payment, right? Going from what we were doing with renting to going to that mortgage payment, that felt like a huge risk. But keeping that long-term goal in mind can be really helpful, especially in a market like this, or if you're in a more expensive market. And Diem, bought her first house a bit ago. What year was it?
2016.
2016. And it was still... You still had to go an hour north.
And that would probably, still be true today if I hadn't collected my assets in my portfolio to generate income. And a lot of the objections that if you look in my comments on a lot of the other videos, people will come up with plenty of reasons. I had 3 major ones.
Yeah.
And there could be more. Time could even be part of it. So if you can't afford to buy it now, are you working towards a plan to accomplish this goal later if this is something that you want for yourself? And also people will say, well, I'm single. I only have one income. That was true for me. And I replaced it with having a roommate because that's like having 2 incomes. And so there is a way, and timing has a place in that as well.
Absolutely.
And so having a goal, working towards your goal, and then looking at the things that are obstacles and asking yourself, how can I overcome that? Yes. And if you have enough solutions, you can make that fit.
Which kind of leads us perfectly into our next topic, which was how do we meet our lender and agent? Because these are people that can help you identify how to get over these hurdles many times. So, Diem, for you, how did you go about getting an agent and a lender, and which one did you contact first?
I cannot tell you how I found my first agent, and it's okay because he's not my first continued agent anymore. You learn over the years, having purchased as many homes as I have, that, some are better than others. But one of the things that I did really enjoy was that he referred me to a lender that I used many times. And what I really like is when the agent and the lender have had previous transactions with each other, because the rhythm is just a lot more smooth. They can communicate with each other better. Like now I have clients where they'll come to me with a lender that I'm more than happy to work with. But sometimes the communication I find is a little bit less smooth, and that can cause a slight delay. If I reach out to Hannah, she's calling me back within minutes. But sometimes I'll reach out to a lender that I haven't worked before, and maybe I'm a little bit lower of a priority on their list. And so the callback is a little bit later, and that's, not as efficient for the client. All that to say, sometimes you find one and then you find another that they've worked with, and maybe they'll have multiple referrals for you. Maybe if it's a lender, they'll have more than one agent that they could refer you to, and vice versa. But that's how I found my lender. I liked her so much, I kept her for the next few transactions, and I still love her to this day. But now I have Hannah, so there's that. But then the ball kept rolling after that.
And so you don't remember who you contacted first, though?
I contacted the agent. I just don't remember how I found him.
Okay, got it.
It's
so
a mystery.
Contacted the agent first, then the agent connected you with the lender.
Yeah.
You got to use the lender a couple times, which is also very helpful.
Yes.
Because the lender will usually have your profile already, and maybe some of the paperwork they need already, which is great. So if you can work with the same lender you've been working with and you're happy with that experience, it is really wonderful.
Yeah.
For me, we had a friend who is a lender, and we wanted to go through him. So we ended up going through him, and my qualification for that, I was kind of leading the financial piece. My husband, bless his heart, was just like, okay, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And I'm like, okay, we're taking charge here and getting things done. And so I reached out to him, and I was interested specifically in using a first-time homebuyer program. So my only criteria was, can you use this program? And he was like, yes. I was like, perfect. And then I actually found my agent because I was looking, again, if you watch our first episode, I mentioned that I'm a huge deal shopper, which I am.
She is.
And when I was buying this first house, I was like, I want to get the most deals possible.
And she did.
We got an incredible deal. And so with my agent, I was looking for a person specifically that worked with first responders, nurses, people who work in like the public sector, because that is the type of job my husband has. And so I was thinking there has to be, some type of program available. And there was. It is called Homes for Heroes. It's an amazing program that gives back. It gives a credit back to your buyer transactions. And so I found one agent on that website in my area, and it was, the person who has helped us with both of our home purchases, and that's how I met her. And she had never worked with my lender before, and same as Diem mentioned, it is so preferable to work with an agent and lender who work together. I mean, same on my end. It's just absolutely preferred to work with an agent that I know is going to get the job done, right? And I know people think the same thing. If they're working with me, it's like because they want to know the job can get done. So if someone doubts me, I know why. If it's their first time, it's like they haven't built the trust yet.
Yeah.
But then once you build that trust, it's really valuable. But I remember my agent being a little suspicious during the purchase because I'm telling her how, the type of loan and asking for all these credits, and she's like, this is impossible. And then it worked. And she was like, okay, well, that was amazing. And she still, loves speaking with that lender today because he did such a good job for us. So that's how I met the people I ended up working with. And again, I just wish I had connected with them earlier.
Yeah, not on our itinerary, but I think a good piece to point out was what are some deal-saving ways that you found during that? So do you want to expand any more on those?
Oh, the first-time homebuyer program?
Yeah, like just in general, like in our first home purchase, what were ways that you found that you were able to save money?
Well, I mean, one was the down payment. We didn't end up having to spend money on the down payment because we got a first-time homebuyer program that lent us the money for the down payment. A lot of these programs used to gift you the money as a repayable grant that you've repaid with time in the house. And then they would forgive you the gift or the loan that would turn into a gift. Most of those have been done away with. There's not very many down payment assistance programs nowadays that loan is going to turn into a gift. It really is going to be a loan. And so we had a first-time homebuyer program that lent us the money for the minimum down payment, which we did a conventional loan, so that was 3% for a first-time homebuyer. And that was attached to our home as a second mortgage. And then we used some closing cost assistance as well from the same program, which is CalHFA. It's the California Housing Finance Agency. And they offer many different programs for buyers, even for developers with affordable housing. So they offer a lot of things for the state of California. And most states have a program like this or an agency like this that you can go to and find a first-time homebuyer program that will offer down payment and closing cost assistance. So we didn't have to put the down payment down. We ended up getting half of our closing costs covered because during the inspection period, we inspected literally everything and, found quite a bit of items that would need to be addressed in the near future. And we felt like, in order for us to purchase this home, we need this amount of credit. So then we have X amount of money available, right? Yeah. Later. So that was another way. So at the end of the day, we ended up spending around $3,000 to get into our first home.
Did you hear that?
Which we bought for $530,000. So this was not a $200,000 home, a $100,000 home. This is a $530,000 home, over $500,000, and we got into it for around $3,000.
Even I was shook. I was like, what kind of witchcraftery is this? Because at that time, when Hannah bought that house, I had already bought two, I think. And so the legwork and research that I went into it with, I didn't believe her that she could do this. And of course, first of all, never doubt Hannah. But secondly, you just don't know what resources are out there.
Exactly.
And to not limit yourself on what you think, like there's still plenty of people who believe you have to have a 20% down to buy a home. To go as far as saying you only spent $3,000 to get in the door of home ownership for multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in an asset that has since grown.
Yes.
And now become a cash generating asset.
Cash generating asset that also has appreciated in value a lot because it was a fixer. So we fixed a lot of things. Yeah. And brought it, back up to market value. And it, is continuing to appreciate.
Yeah, so that's an incredible story. I just think that's amazing. In my situation, how I found to save money was using the FHA loan, so doing 3.5% down. That's all I could qualify for, also because of my bankruptcy from before. And then we requested closing costs as a part of the negotiations. This house sat on the market, I think, for just over a month. I'm sure they were about to experience the first price reduction. And so instead of going that route, asking for a reduction in price, I think we offered at list price or maybe 5,000 below list plus closing credits. And so if you don't know what that is, that's an expense that comes out of the buyer's side.
Yes.
And it covers, Hannah will go over what the cost covers, but if you are spending your own cash to cover your closing costs, that means you just have less cash later to do any repairs, maintenance, or for your emergency fund. So for me, my strategy has been to ask for closing costs, and I've been successful in 5 of the 6 purchases that I've made.
Amazing.
So
and
share
yes,
it with
so
us.
closing costs cover all the costs necessary to complete that transaction. And this is going to be whether it's a purchase or a refinance, because there are many parties involved in doing these processes, whether it's a purchase, again, or a refinance. There's other parties involved. So closing costs usually cover any types of lender fees, any appraisal fees, if you have an HOA, any fees it costs to get documents from them, and to do a condo cert if you're doing that with an HOA or a condo complex. You have title fees, which are usually going to be the most expensive part of those fees that are going to another party. So that's usually going to be the title fees. And then you have taxes and insurance. And in closing costs, if you're putting less than 20% down or have less than 20% equity in your home in a refinance, you have to pay taxes and insurance up front a couple of months, and then those payments are wrapped into your monthly payment. So then during the year, your loan servicer can pay those property taxes on your behalf, pay your home insurance on your behalf. If you have more than 20% equity in a home or have 20% down, you don't have to include that in those closing costs. However, if you want that all wrapped into your monthly payment, you have to pay that up front. But remember, you're not paying it to other people at this moment. It's just a savings account for you to pay those property taxes and insurance in the future. But that is a cost at closing that you want to be prepared for. So a pretty good estimate for closing costs is between 2 to 3% of the purchase price. And so when you think about that, you're not just thinking about having 3% down as your down payment or using a down payment assistance program, but you want to also be thinking that you want to have that 2 to 3% in addition available for those closing costs.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, as we've both just stated, there are ways to have that covered. And I have plenty of clients who, from the very beginning, from the pre-approval, we've already established that this is how we're paying closing costs. You know, if you have limited funds, don't let that stop you from seeing if you can qualify to buy a home. So, you know, limited funds, it may seem like a hurdle. It's actually not the biggest hurdle when it comes to being pre-approved.
Yeah, and Hannah saved even more money than I did because my down payment at 3.5% I think was like $11,000 or $13,000, not $3,000. Luckily, I got my whole closing costs covered for, which meant that probably a portion of that went towards my future expenses that was paid up front.
Yes.
Inside that close. Okay, very good.
Yeah, and then this is a fun question. But I think it's one we need to address and talk about. We're talking about all these great things we got to do with these houses. We got into the house for very small amounts of money. Did you get cold feet at any point in this process?
I did not.
An anomaly.
I did not. I got a plan. I'm buying 4 to 5 houses in my future, and this is step 1. I was just super stoked.
I do believe this, by the way. Diem is when she has a plan, she's laid it out, and you just do it. You're like, this is the plan, this fits the bill, here I am.
Yes, and the other piece of it, too, is I didn't have someone else, except for my sister and brother-in-law, who co-signed to worry about. And since
Yeah.
I had a lot of research behind me, I felt as confident as I could possibly be. I couldn't be beyond confident, it's just what I've researched. Now it's about go time, like let's practice this. But I did what I could, and I was just really ready to go, excited to rent out part of it as an Airbnb in the back, part of it inside as a roommate, because there was a granny unit in the back. I don't think I said that earlier. So I was super stoked.
I love that for you so much. It's fabulous. I had cold feet multiple times during the process. And yes, it is different when you have a partner that you're working with because your cold feet kind of play off of each other. And we definitely were playing off of each other's cold feet. But there were multiple times during the process, even getting my husband to be like, okay, yeah, let's get pre-approved and meet this realtor. We'll see what happens. Oh, we're actually seeing a house? What? But for me, during the process, even when we're looking at these loan documents, seeing what the payment would be, really deciding if, we're going to spend money on this and then purchasing a home that needed a lot of renovating. It was like, should we be doing this? Should we even do this? And what we were looking at actually was this home that, needed some renovating that was under market value, that we were able to build equity in quickly because of bringing it back up to market value versus a complete new build.
Right.
And not having to do anything in that complete new build. But there were major downsides to that. There is an HOA, which who knows, what that would look like with renters in the future if we want to rent it out. Definitely could not partition the house out to be rented if we wanted to do that and add a wall or whatever it is. Also, the property taxes is something really important. Most of the time with new build communities, you may have increased property taxes in order to compensate for that increase in population. The property taxes in that area, we're going to have us spending about 1.75% of the purchase price on property taxes every year versus 1.25%. That's a huge difference.
Right.
Savings, thousands of dollars of savings a year that would then tie into in the future our profit margin if we're renting. So had cold feet many times being like, are we sure we want to do this? Do we want our monthly payment to be this high? And to this day, my husband will tell you that's the best investment we've ever made. And I agree. So cold feet is totally part of the process.
Yeah.
And I think you touched on something really important, Diem, where you said you were as confident as you could be. And I think that's really important to talk about because there's only a certain level of confidence you can have before you sign on the dotted line. So cold feet is normal. If it's happening, it doesn't mean you shouldn't buy the house. But keep your goals in mind. If you know you can do this, then you probably can. But if you get cold feet, it's okay.
Yeah.
It even happened with my second house. It's going to happen with every house. I guarantee you. Every single home purchase, I'm going to have cold feet at some point and have to be like, no, this is the plan.
And that's such a great point too about knowing yourself. Your personality type, your risk tolerance, how you can sleep at night. When we talked about debt before, it's like some people really need to pay off all their debt because that's what they need. And it might not be the best financial decision, let's say, in some scenarios, but maybe if that's what they need to make the next step, that's totally okay too. And so a lot of things are kind of a part of the process. And for me, I think one of my problems I wouldn't call it a problem, but I just leap. I just do it, right? And then I'll figure out the pieces later. I'll just do as much research as I can. And sometimes I look back and I think, oh, I could have probably bought that house with $3,000 out of my pocket.
Or $1,000.
Yeah.
I've done it for $1,000 with other people.
She's done it for other people for $1,000. That has never been the case for me. And yet we have to start somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're always trying to do the perfect thing, you're probably never going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, you can always learn from the experience, and that's the best thing, right? And it's exactly what we're going to talk about next. What will we do differently? And it's really important to talk about that.
And if you have any remorse, too.
Yes, because it's important to talk about those things, because hopefully this isn't your only home purchase, and it's going to happen again. So what can we take from it, from that first purchase into the next one? So did you have buyer's remorse, and what would you have done differently?
Okay, so I didn't have any buyer's remorse, but what I would have done differently was I would probably have tried to look for a fourplex as my first purchase.
Okay.
That is a little ambitious because you're taking on new home ownership along with learning how to be a landlord. And we don't live in a landlord-friendly state, per se. Our state in California tends to favor tenant laws more. And so that would have been a bigger learning curve. But at that time, being able to qualify for an FHA loan at 3.5% would have allowed me to buy up to a 4-unit building with that loan product.
Yes.
And that's a screaming deal if you can make that happen and make the numbers work. The other piece of that is that even though my income was low, and this is still true today, is that you can use the incomes of the other 3 units towards the qualifying numbers. And so I was a little too scared to try that strategy at that time, especially with my sister and my brother-in-law being co-signers and having liabilities of having that many tenants.
Totally.
But looking back, if I could do it again, that would be something I'd do differently, is I would have started with a fourplex.
That's really good advice. That's a better thing than I would have done differently, but it's more financially minded.
What was yours?
So if I could have done something differently, it would have been to get pre-approved sooner. Because that was the biggest hurdle for my husband and I, which we had different money mindsets, which we're going to talk about in a different video. But getting to that point where we both were like, okay, this is something we both want to do, and him being at that point a very big part of that picture because he was providing most of the income for qualifying. And so, I really had to have his buy-in. Yeah. And I think if I had talked to a lender sooner and was able to show him and myself that we could have done this way before, we would have another home by now, or even a different home as the first property that's even would have appreciated more. Now, did I have buyer's remorse about that property? No, not at all, because it was such a sound financial decision, and I'm so happy we made that decision. And the cold feet didn't last long, thankfully. Now, but let me bring this back, because with my second property that I just bought, I have experienced some buyer's remorse because I'm a deal person, and I didn't get it as a deal because we're in a different life situation now where we're like, you know what? I don't think we want to do all the renovations right now or go through that whole process. So it is a wonderful, beautiful home, and sometimes that's going to creep in because it's a huge purchase. So I didn't have it with my first one. I had a little bit with my second one, so you never know what that's going to look like. But what I would have done differently is definitely spoke to a lender as soon as possible, as soon as I even thought, was interested in the possibility of buying a home. And
so if Hannah can be of service to you, what states can you do, Hannah?
So we can lend in almost every state. There's only a couple that we can't, New York being one of them. So New York has really difficult broker regulations even to get licensed there. So we don't lend in New York, but most of the other ones we can do. So if you do have questions, of course, feel free to reach out and we'd be happy to talk.
Yes, and I'm a licensed realtor in California, so if this resonates with you, like having a realtor or a lender who kind of understands the nuances of being a home buyer with a vision for the future and different strategies on how to save money or avoid pitfalls, we'd love to help. Our contacts below. If you haven't liked and subscribed already, please do so, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!
Bye!